everyone, and welcome back to Alfred's Basic Adult Piano Course, Lesson Book Level 1. This is video 61, and we're going to cover pages 68 and 69 in our book today. Right hand in extended position, and the song On Top of Old Smoky. All right, so let's take a look at the top of page 68, and let's look at this right hand extended position first. So your right hand, you're used to playing in the C position, which we're actually going to start with. So that's the thumb on middle C, 2 on D, 3 on E, 4 on F, and 5 on G. But if you look at the diagram there at the top of 68, notice that the E is not played with your third finger, but in this extended position, you're going to use the second finger. So your thumb is still on middle C, but you're going to move 2 to E, and you're going to bring 3 up to G. And the reason for this is so we can get smoothly all the way up to this high C with our fifth finger. And these are actually the first few notes for On Top of Old Smoky. So when you start On Top of Old Smoky, see if you can stretch your hand to reach these 4 notes ahead of time with this fingering. 1 on C, 2 on E, 3 on G, and 5 on this high C. So if you can do that, you've already got your hand in position for the first several notes of the piece. Now, if you can't make this stretch yet, don't worry about it. You can still kind of roll the hand along a little bit. So it's not literally a roll with your hand, but it's kind of just moving along up to the C. So really, in other words, I'm not keeping my thumb all the way down on middle C. But if you can make this stretch, I would encourage you to go ahead and do so, because this is actually covering a C major chord with an octave C. So actually what you're doing is you're playing C octaves in there. And octaves are actually a really, really common thing in piano, especially, well, really in both hands. So this is something you're eventually going to learn anyways. Playing an octave harmonically, so the 2 C's at the same time. But again, if you can't do that just yet, no worries. But that's something I do encourage you to look at if you can. So that covers that extended position in the right hand. That's all there is to it. The left hand, we're going to review some block chords and broken chords in the key of C. So remember, in the key of C, your 3 primary chords are the 1 chord, which is C, and we're playing this in root position. That means C, E, and G. So this is just a review there at the middle of page 68 in our left-hand bass clef. So that is the 1 chord in the key of C major. The 4 chord, which you should also be familiar with at this point, is your F chord. And that is keeping the C at the bottom there with your 5th finger, 2 on F, and thumb on A. Followed by the 5-7 chord, which is G7, and that's the one where your 5th finger moves down to B. You have 2 on F, and you have thumb on G. So you're going to want to review those a few times before we go on to the broken chords. Now, the broken chords here is what's really important, because that's what we're using in our left hand for this song. So again, remember, a broken chord in this case, we're doing all 3 notes individually, one at a time, is playing the block chord, but just 1 note at a time. So it's the same outline, it's the same fingering. So here's the block chord for the C chord. For the broken chord, you're just going to play C, followed by the E with your 3rd finger, followed by the G with your thumb. And then our rhythms for these are just quarter notes, so just 1, 2, 3. For the 4 chord, the F chord, same thing. You're going to play C with your 5th finger, followed by F with your 2nd finger, followed by the thumb with your A. And again, they're just quarter notes. 1, 2, 3. And then lastly, your G7 chord. So that would be the 5 on B, followed by 2 on F, followed by the thumb on G. So what you want to practice here with these broken chords is just making sure you can get them evenly and go from one measure to the next without hesitation. So again, keeping a steady rhythm, a steady beat actually, without pause. And you can do that as slow as you need to make sure you get that. And then, practice a little bit faster, because on top of Old Smoky is moderately slow. So not too fast, but not too slow. So since we're talking about the left hand, let's look at the left hand on top of Old Smoky. All it is broken chords. Quarter note broken chords, the entire piece, until you get to the very, very last measure. At the bottom of page 69, that's just a C dotted half note tied over to a half note for a total of 5 counts. But everything else is this broken chord pattern. The first chord there on the, actually measure 3, or the second full measure, is actually not the C chord, it is the F chord. If you look carefully there, it's actually C followed by F followed by A. Now, unlike the broken chord exercise you went through, you're actually playing the same chord 3 measures in a row. So if you look at the next 2 measures, measures 4 and 5, it is also C, F, and A. And once again, C, F, and A. So you're playing the broken F chord 3 times in a row. And that's going to be the case also throughout this piece. You're basically going to have one broken chord, 3 measures in a row, followed by a measure of rest, and then the broken chord again, but it'll be a different chord. So speaking of the measure of rest, look at the left hand in the start. So we do have 3 beats per measure. The first measure is an incomplete measure. There's only 1 beat. So remember, if you have 3 beats per measure, 1 incomplete beat is going to be beat 3. How do we know this? Look at the end of page 69, the very bottom, last measure. That measure has half notes, so that's only 2 counts. Half note is beats 1 and 2. And then at the beginning, there's the rest of the measure, the incomplete measure on beat 3. Now, the left hand has a quarter rest, so you're not playing in the left hand. And the very first full measure, the left hand has a whole rest. In this case, the whole measure is 3 beats, so 3 beats of rest. So you're not coming in right away with that left hand. But when you start the piece, I would recommend, I mentioned the outline earlier of the extended position in the right hand, have your fingers ready to go on C, F, and A in the left hand. So approach it like you're going to play a block chord. That way your fingers are already there, and by the time you get to that measure, you're able to play without having to find those notes. They're already there. Now, one more thing about the left hand throughout the piece, look at the pedaling. The pedaling is right in sync with the left hand. Every time the left hand plays, the pedal is down. Now, it stays down these 3 measures. And the reason for that is it's the same chord over and over. So a lot of times when you have the same harmony, the same chord, you don't need to pedal up and down. That's only when you're changing chords. Now, at the end of those 3 measures that we just played there at the top line, you do have that measure of rest at the end of the line. You won't pedal there. So notice at the end of the 5th measure, the last measure of the left hand playing, as soon as you're done playing that left hand, you're coming off the pedal completely. And then you're going to go back on the pedal when you play at the bottom line. Now the bottom line is the C chord, C, E, and G. And again, it's 3 measures in a row of just C, E, and G stated quarter notes with the pedal down, and then you're off the pedal. Now, I keep talking about pedal now because it coincides with the left hand. So remember, the thing about pedaling is you want to have your heel down the whole time. You never want to take the heel off the ground. You can either keep your foot down, well, I should say, when you're not pedaling, have your foot resting on the pedal, or with your heel, you can swing it over to the side. Now, it's really up to you. Sometimes it depends on the pedal. If you're on a piano or a keyboard where the pedal is very loose and sensitive, resting may not be an option. You may accidentally push down. If you have a much tighter pedal, especially on a grand piano, stiffer pedaling allows you to actually rest your foot and it won't go down. If you want to be really safe, again, with your heel planted, just twist the foot over and rest your foot to the side. But again, you don't want to completely remove your foot, remove your heel from the area, because by the time you get your foot back, it might be too late. You might be too sloppy. You might hit the wrong pedal. You might accidentally kick the the board under there, so a lot of things can go wrong. So always keep your heel planted and either twist and put your foot down there or rest it on the pedal. Now, that's the other thing. When you do pedal down, don't lift. You may find yourself doing that if you have very little experience in pedaling. So I remember when I first learned pedal, I was doing this the whole time, and my knee was actually hitting the underside of the piano. So I was just really working on the coordination. So, you know, if you're trying to work coordination and you have to make big movements, I do believe in making big movements. So I would say, sure, go ahead and do that in the beginning, but you want to get to that point very quickly where you practice getting that heel planted and all you're moving is the front part of your foot up and down, or again, to the side. So going back to the left hand, when you start the piece, remember I said have the left hand in this block chord position, C, F, and A. Likewise, have your foot resting on the pedal, or at least to the side. Because it's the very first time of the piece that I'm pedaling, I may want to go ahead and have my foot already on there, ready to go. So when you're done playing the top line, this broken F chord, I personally like to swing over and just rest my foot to the side. Because I have a whole measure of rest, I can do that. And then when I get to the bottom line, to the C chord, you know, bring it over and have it down. So you're actually going to push down on the pedal when you hit the first note at the bottom of page 68. That's C on beat 1. You want your pedal to go down at the same time. When you hit that C and your foot's not down until, say, maybe the E, you've lost the C now. So the point of the pedal is to carry the C through. So you see, when I hit the E, I still hear the C, and that's the whole point. So if moving the foot to the side doesn't work out for you, then your other option I'd recommend is just resting it on the pedal. So now let's keep looking at the left hand. So at the bottom of 68, you've played the C chord. I'll go ahead and do the pedal since I'm talking about it. You played the broken C chord in measures, the first 3 measures of that line. In the 4th measure of that line, you've got to rest. So pedal up. In the last measure, that is your G7 chord, okay? And the same thing with the pedal. So when you play the B, your pedal's going to go down and hold it down. And the pattern's the same. If you look to the top of 69, you're playing that broken G7 chord 3 times. Still quarter notes, followed by a full measure of rest for 3 counts. And then the last 3 measures, that's the C chord, C, E, and G. So once again, have that pedal down as soon as you hit that very first C. When you hit this G, come off the pedal when you come off the left hand. So the pedaling in this piece works very closely with the left hand. When the left hand goes down, the pedal goes down. When the left hand comes up to rest, the pedal's up to rest. Now on page 69, the second measure, second line, that is a repeat of the beginning of the song again. Actually in the right hand as well. So that means in the left hand, you're resting on the first measure. In measure 2, you're back to your F chord. So pedal down when you hit the C, and then you got the F, and then the A. You have 2 more measures of C, F, and A. Now when you lift the left hand, lift the pedal, and you rest for 3 counts. Going down to the 3rd line, the C chord. So pedal down on C, E, G, and 2 more measures of that. And pedal and left hand off for a full measure of rest. And then we have our G7 chord, the last 2 measures. So down on B, F, G, down to the bottom line. Both left hand and pedal up. And then lastly, you have the broken C chord. Pedal down on C, E, G, C, E, G. And this is where it's different. You just hit that C. And now here's a little cheat. The pedal is down to the very end of the piece. Technically, you're supposed to hold the C down with your 5th finger for 5 counts. But the little cheat is this. If I hold it with the pedal, does it make any difference if I don't hold it with the pedal? In other words, if I take my left hand off and the pedal's down, you still hear it. So you can get by with removing the hand early if you want. Don't have to, but if you want, the sound will still be there. So that's a little cheat when you have the pedal down and you got a long hold. You technically don't have to hold it with your hand because your left hand's holding it. I mean, your foot is holding it, your right foot. How about that? Your left hand is not holding it because the pedal's down. How about that? Okay. So let's look at the right hand now. So going back to the very beginning, the right hand, extended position. So I said in the beginning that you're going to start in the middle C position, but extend it. So if you can get these fingers on these notes, that'll give you the advantage. Thumb on C, 2 on E, 3 on G, and 5 on C. Your very first note in the incomplete measure is C. The next measure is another C, followed by that 2 on E, 3 on G, and the next measure, that 5 on C. They even remind us, extended position with that red bracket up there. Okay, so 3 counts per measure. First measure is incomplete. So your right hand enters on beat 3 of this piece. So you've got beat 3 and then 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So you have that C up there for 3 counts. So remember, when you start the piece, you have 2 middle Cs. You have one on beat 3 in that first measure. You also have another middle C, beat 1 of the next measure. Okay? And then the E, and then the G, and then that C for 3 counts. You did play with you did play G with the third finger. Now look in measure 4. You're going to take the 3 to A. So a slight move there. Don't try to do it with 4. That's a big stretch. Do the 3 that they indicate. And that is tied for a total of 5 counts. Tied half note, tied to another 2 counts. So in the next measure, you're still holding it in beats 1 and 2, and then your thumb comes up to F. It was down on middle C, now it's going to come up to F. In the last measure, you're going to hit F again on beat 1, and then G with 2, 3 with A, and then the bottom line, 2 on G. Hold it for a very long time because it's 3 counts tied into the next measure, another 3 counts, tied into the next measure, another 2 counts. So 3, 3, and 2. 8 counts total right there. You might be thinking at this point, now that's a long hold. Do I need to hold it? You said earlier the pedal would take care of it and I could lift. I did say that. I wouldn't get in the habit of doing that though, especially in your melody with your right hand. But I'll put it this way, if it happened accidentally, you're okay. How about that? So, going on in the bottom line, in the third measure on beat 3, you're going to bring your thumb down to middle C. Now, I actually recommend you go ahead and bring the whole hand down to the C position. Because if you look ahead there, you got your thumb on middle C. In the next measure, you have thumb on C again. Then you have your third finger on E. Not the extended position where you had 2 on E, but this is back to our old C position of 3 on E. That means 5 will go to G. And then the last measure is G again with 5. So if you're not having to go all the way up to this high C, you just go back to the regular position. So you could even write in the music above there, regular position or just standard C position. Something to help remind you if you're not making that move ahead of time. So you could wait and move the third finger last minute to that E, or like I said, when you're here with your 2 on G, you could make the move down with your whole hand. And that way you're set up ahead of time. Just like I said at the beginning of the piece, have your fingers set ahead of time. It's good within a piece if you know there's a section with a certain hand position to get there ahead of time if you can. Gives you the advantage. All right, so the last measure on 68, 3 counts on that G. Top of page 69, first measure. Second finger on D. 3 counts and tied for another 2 counts for a total of 5 counts. So in measure 2, you're still holding on beats 1, 2. Now, you have 2 eighth notes, and these are the only eighth notes in this whole piece aside from at the bottom of page 69, the first measure, only because it's the same exact material repeated. Normally I say, well, if you have eighth notes, the whole piece needs to be counted with the and system, 1 and 2 and 3 and. At this point, I think you guys have done eighth notes enough that if you only see these 2 eighth notes in the whole piece, not necessary to count the whole piece. What you need to remember is that your eighth notes are twice as fast as a quarter note, 2 eighth notes per beat. So what you could do at the top of page 69, I have my second finger on D, and let's say I'm counting along starting in the first measure. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1. And notice I went on to that F in the next measure to ensure both eighth notes, were even. So you could just squeeze it in there. 3 and 1, 2, 3. So fit it in like that. You're probably good enough with eighth notes, I'm sure you could do that, rather than having to count the entire piece with ands. Okay, so one more time at the top of 69, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 1. So in the third measure, that's an F, fourth finger down to E, down to D, and then the next measure down to C for a total of 8 counts. 3 counts tied to another 3 for 6, tied to another 2 in the last measure for a total of 8. Stay right there because you're going to hit middle C again on beat 3 at the end of 69. This is where it repeats note for note, rhythm for rhythm from the beginning. So you're essentially going back to the beginning in a sense. You're playing the exact same material, same fingering. So that means when we get to the second line, that's the extended C position. So at the second line, first measure, first note, that's middle C, second finger to E now, as they have noted there. Third finger to G, fifth finger all the way up to the high C for 3 counts. Now you're going to bring your 3 to A in the next measure for a total of 5 counts because it's tied. So in that next measure, thumb on F on beat 3. Last measure, F again, G, A, and then G in the third line for 8 counts. So again, all this is a repeat of what you had at the beginning. Third line, measure 3, you're going to go down to middle C, and remember, try to do the C position. Don't just bring your thumb down, bring your whole hand down. That means putting 3 on E, because when you go on to measure 4 on that third line, there it is, third finger on E, 5 on G. And then the next measure, G again for 3 counts, down to D. And the last measure for 3 counts, tied for another 2 counts. So don't let that sneak up on you. There's a tie there going into the bottom line. So that D is 5 counts. Just like at the top of page 69, you got the 2 eighth notes. 3 and 1, 2, 3, and then down the middle C. Now in this case, at the bottom of the page, middle C in measures 3 and 4 is 6 counts. Because the ending is a little different. We have this little ending, which is actually the extended position. So on the second to last measure, middle C with your thumb, 2 on E, 3 on G, and bring that 5 all the way up to C. And there it is. So that covers the right hand. And as you practice the right hand, notice that it's very smooth. You have all these legato markings, all these slurs. So the ties, there's a lot of ties in there. The ties connect the same pitch, all right? And usually, it looks like in this piece, all the ties, the slurs are going under the note. Whereas the slurs for legato playing, they're going over the notes. And the slurs for legato are really long, so they're connecting a lot of notes. So the right hand is meant to be very, very smooth, not choppy. This would be choppy. Of course, I'm overdoing it with a lot of wrist motion, but stay closer to the keys. course, making sure your fingers are curved like you're holding a ball is really going to be helpful too. All right, so now I'd like to put the hands together. You know, we've been doing it, the left hand with the pedal. So at this point, I would encourage you, when you put the hands together, to go ahead and include the pedal. Normally, I'd say, you know, leave the pedal for the very end, but it just works so tight with the left hand that I encourage you to practice that left hand with the pedal, and then when you put the hands together, do the same. So have everything in place before you start. So make sure the right hand, if you can, is in that extended position. If nothing else, at least have your thumb on middle C. Your left hand, the F chord, play it, you know, have it laid out like a block chord. C with your 5th finger, 2 on F, thumb on A. And lastly, heel to the ground and toes, or the top portion of your foot, not pushing down on the pedal, but, you know, resting above it. You don't want to push down because you don't pedal right away. You pedal when the left hand comes in the 3rd measure. All right, so I'm going to play it very slowly, maybe stopping if there's tricky spots. I'm not going to do a count off yet. But so notice it starts with the right hand first on middle C, and then you have C again, and then E, G, and now here's where everything comes down at once. When I say everything, that's left hand, right hand, and foot. In a way, it's not too difficult because you're using your 5th finger in both hands and they're both C's. So that's kind of nice. Keep in mind, you're going to hold the right hand for 3 counts while your left hand goes on and plays these quarter notes. Now the next measure, you might be tempted to pedal. Don't, you're still holding it down. But your left hand moves to the 3 on A. And your right hand goes, I'm sorry, mixing up my hands today. Your right hand goes to 3 on A, your left hand goes to 5 on C. So make sure they're together before going on. And in the next measure, you might be tempted to hit the right hand again. It's tied. And so is the foot. It's still down on the pedal. So at this point, the only thing playing is 5 on C. And at the end of the measure, your thumb on A in the left hand, 1 on F in the right hand. Make sure you get these together. Your pedal's still down. So when you go to the next measure, left hand and pedal come off and the right hand hits an F. Just like that. And you can bring your pedal foot to the side or leave it there. I think I'm going to leave mine there. I said earlier I'd keep it to the side. I changed my mind. I can do that. So last measure, you've got just the right hand playing. Okay, don't take your left hand off the piano because you're not going far. Right hand's on F, G, A, and at the bottom line, everything's together. Everything, including the foot. Hold the right hand down for a long time. You're going to be playing just the left hand. Now I said if you bring up the right hand by accident, or you could do it, it's fine. It's not going to get lost. That G is in there. But don't go far. Don't take your hand off the piano because you got to move. Remember, move the whole right hand. So at the end of the 3rd measure on the bottom line, thumb on G, right hand middle C, right hand also in that C position. A lot of things to line up. Still down on the pedal. Next measure, the only thing we have is right hand. Left hand and pedal up. And you hit middle C again. And then 3 on E, 5 on G, and then everything in the last measure, you're going down to the G7 chord. So be careful about that. That move to 5 on B. G in the right hand, pedals down. Top of the page, you're moving to a D in the right hand. Don't let that sneak up on you. Still holding the pedal, B in the left hand. The next measure, here's where you have the 8th notes. And then you're off. So that happens pretty quick. So you got to really probably count that a couple times. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1. So when you hit that F on beat 1 and measure 3, you're off everything else. 2, 3, and then the 4th measure, both C's, middle C here and this C together, plus pedal plus pedal with your foot. It goes down. And it's just the left hand that keeps moving here because your right hand is tied all the way to the end of the line. When you get to the very last note of this top line, it is like the beginning again, except your left hand has a G. It did not have that at the beginning. Remember, it had a quarter rest. So you have that together. And then the next measure, you're off. Extended position in the right hand. Just like the beginning, everything repeats. So all this is the same that we just went through. And I just discovered something about the pedal. Actually, I'll go ahead and mention that now. So I'm looking deeper into the pedal, and I was telling you guys when you're doing the left hand, and actually when you're doing both hands, to lift the pedal when you get to that measure of rest. Actually, to be more technical, and this is actually harder, but this is technically accurate. Just go back to page 68, the top line. So your pedal's down when you do the left hand. When you get to the very last note in the last measure where the left hand plays, when you hit that A, hit the A and then come off the pedal. That actually is going to make it a little bit cleaner. So what you're going to do the same thing actually when you add both hands. So starting at the beginning again with both hands, pedal down here. Right here. Notice what I did. As I go down with the notes, I'm coming up with the pedal. That is harder to do. Yes, that is more difficult, but it'll be much cleaner. The reason for this is when I started doing this with the right hand, I noticed that the right hand right there is starting a new phrase, a new sentence. And I actually would prefer to disconnect the pedal there rather than keep the pedal holding into that, right? So it's going to be cleaner that way. Technically, that's the way it's marked. So I do apologize if you've learned it already the other way. You could do it the other way, but it just won't be as clean, okay? This will actually be very, very clean, very, very nice. So everywhere you see that in the piece where the pedal marking comes off, don't wait for the measure, don't wait for beat one of the measure with the rest. Go ahead and take it off while the notes go down on beat 3 in the previous measure. Okay, so one more time. From the beginning, everything comes down here. Keep the pedal down. Here's the last measure. Right here on beat 3, my hands go down, my foot comes up, and it stays up. I'm just gonna rest it or put it to the side. And then everything down. Same thing right here. So I'm at the bottom line, third measure, beat 3. Down with my fingers, up with my foot. That will take some time to coordinate, but again, it'll make things very, very clean. So going back to page 69, it's all a repeat of the beginning. Everything's the exact same thing until you get to the bottom line. Last 4 measures, so everything's down on measure 3. Measure 4. Keep the pedal down, and here you are with these C's together, and the rest is just the right hand in the extended position. And that's it. Now, there's the counting, there's the even tempo you got to work on, maybe getting it a little faster. The good news is there are no complicated rhythms. Most of this piece is just a lot of quarter notes dictated by the left hand. Of course, those spots with the 8th notes, there's 2 of them. They're the exact same thing repeated. We want to make sure that's precise. But otherwise, it's pretty standard as far as dynamics go. You know, mezzo forte, there's a little diminuendo at the end, just fading away. So before we finish up, I'm going to play it one time through for you, up to tempo, so you can hear what that sounds like. And I'll give a little count off. I'll give a full measure of 3, followed by 2 more beats. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And it doesn't even slow down at the end. It just gets a little softer. And then you have a fermata you can just hang on to for a little bit. And the other thing with pedaling is, I said you can remove the left hand. You can remove both hands during that fermata if you want. Just keep your foot down until you're ready to release. So if you were paying really close attention to the pedaling there, I was actually trying it both ways, just out of curiosity. As I never really thought about it this much before, but either way could actually work. So going back to what I was saying about lifting the pedal up when you come down, you can do that, or you can still hold it through the end of that measure. I tried it both ways throughout the piece, and yes, you can hear a little difference. One's a little drier, a little cleaner when you lift the pedal early, like I said. The other actually doesn't interrupt it that much. It's not as muddy as I thought it'd be. It actually carries that previous phrase over into the next phrase. So at that point, I would say it's kind of a matter of taste. But I will say that technically speaking, the way they mark that pedaling, they have it coming up when you hit that last note. Otherwise, they'd have it, going all the way into the next measure. But those are details that, sometimes a musician can interpret differently, and that's okay. The important thing in the end is, does it sound good to your ear? Like I said, to my ear, both kind of work. Do I have a preference? I probably actually would carry the pedal through now that I think about it. I would actually hold it all the way to the next measure. It's a little smoother that way. It doesn't feel quite as abrupt. And it's a little easier to coordinate. So in the end, you might try both ways. Actually, why not? Learn both ways and then you can decide. Because on this piece, you may decide one way. On another piece, you may decide another way. So that's the thing with pedaling. Pedaling can be extremely tricky, but there's not much to learn about pedaling. Once you've learned, that maneuver and a couple others, you've pretty much got it for life. So that's the good news. All right, I hope this lesson has been helpful. If you have any questions, especially about pedaling, please leave them in the comment section below. I'll do my best to answer. And as always, look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.